Hey guys, welcome back to Olivia's Blooms. Today I want to show you a tour of the snapdragons that I grew in my garden this year. Similar to the video I did on zinnias, I think it's interesting to see how the different varieties look, and also if you are a home gardener or you want to grow your own snapdragons, I think it's worth it to be able to see what they look like and how you might be able to use them in your garden. A couple notes first about snapdragons. They are geotropic, and what that means is they will always grow against gravity. So if you don't stake your snapdragons, which I did not this year, if they fall over, you're gonna end up with some very twisty and weird stems. That can be a good thing or a bad thing. So if you are doing arrangements, a lot of, not bouquets, but more bowl or vessel type arrangements, it can add a lot of movement when you've got things that are hanging low. And I have enjoyed that to some extent, but you are risking, especially if you get a lot of rain and wind, having a lot of not straight stems, which can be challenging if you are doing more bouquet work, or if you are trying to sell your flowers, if you're a flower farmer, or selling market bouquets, you might want to stake them. I actually think I might stake mine next year because while I enjoyed some of those bendy stems, I had too many of those and not enough of the straight stems, and I'll show you kind of what that looks like outside. So let me show you real quick what these look like up close, and then I will take you out in the garden to see what they look like in the natural light. Okay, so the first variety I'm going to show you are the Maryland Plumblossom. And you can probably see why they're called Plumblossom. They are white with a very plum colored throat. Now, one thing I've noticed about snapdragons, different than zinnias, is the color is extremely consistent. This is probably, I have 3 or 4 plants of these, and all season long, exactly the same color. What I have seen is variety in the bloom size and height, and also a variety of stem thickness. Now, if you were a flower farmer or a florist or selling these flowers, you really want stems that are about a pencil width thick. So this is pretty close, but I've gotten, this is maybe the thickest that I've gotten the stems, but I've also gotten a lot of really thin ones, even thinner than this. For my purposes, I actually don't mind the thinner stems because I have some really vases with some really small openings that I could fit a lot of these in as just a bunch in and of themselves, because I think they're beautiful just alone, just a simple arrangement. Now you can see here what I'm talking about, the geotropic stems. So this one I think fell over like this and then started to grow up, and then even when it sat in the bucket, started to again grow up. So a little bit challenging to work with. But another thing I like about snapdragons is even if they bloom, so here's a bloom that fell off, you can just pull that off and you've still got this beautiful stem to work with. Now, another thing that people who sell flowers will tell you, and I actually started the season cutting them when they weren't very open. This is probably the best example, but even more just when like a couple flowers were opening, you can harvest them for the longest vase life. But I noticed they don't fully open up in the vase. I only get mine to open maybe a few more rows up. So what I have been doing as the season goes on is I've been waiting and letting them open a little bit more, and more along this lines, at least halfway open. And I find that that tends to look better for just my home use. So that's how I've been picking them, harvesting them at that stage. Although a lot of times the time just gets away from you and you harvest them whenever you can. So they still look beautiful. One more thing about snapdragons is you want to pay attention to the group number. I'm not going to go into too much detail about what the groups are. Johnny's Seeds has a great explanation of the different groups and what they mean, and I'll put a link to that down in my comments. But there are different groups of snapdragons that will tell you when to grow them or when they are best performing. So these are group 1 and 2. It's listed as both 1 and 2. Which means they are good cool season flowers. So I planted all of my snapdragons though the same, even though they're different groups. I started them very early in the year from seed in soil blocks. I started them probably in February, maybe even January, and I planted them out in very early spring, which for us is end of February, beginning of March. And I didn't notice a big difference in the performance. In fact, these performed the best, even though they're not technically a group 3 or 4, which is a main season or all season flowers. These pumped out blooms non-stop since they started blooming probably in April. And it is now October, and you can see they are still going strong. So just a powerhouse performer. And this color went with a lot of things too, which I really enjoyed. So Maryland Plumblossom, if you like this look, I highly recommend growing them. I grew mine in a raised bed, but I also had a little patch of, I'll show you when we go outside, in another area that didn't do so well. But in the raised bed, every month I was cutting these. So great, great flower. All right, let me show you the next variety. Okay, next flower is Madame Butterfly Cherry Bronze. And I really hope the camera is capturing the coloring on these. These are just gorgeous. They open with more of a pink, and then as they age, they turn more of like a sunset orange. It's really hard to see on the camera, but the color has been so fun to work with. And one thing you'll notice about Madame Butterfly is these curly double petals. So what I like about the Madame Butterfly series is it's a different look than the Potomac and Maryland Plumblossom that have this single, the single versus this curly fluffy double, just a little more feminine and frilly. And the Madame Butterfly are a group 3 or 4, also known as main season or all season, but I didn't find that they bloomed better in the summer than the group 1 and 2. So that was kind of interesting and different for me. I was expecting that during the summer these would have really performed better than the Maryland Plumblossom, but they all performed about the same. One thing about the Madame Butterfly Cherry Bronze is, although these two blooms are big, for the most part I got a lot of small blooms off of these plants, even though the spacing and the soil was the same as the others. But you know, they still provided a beautiful pop of pink or peach, so I wasn't too disappointed in that. The stems are not quite as thick as the Potomac mix and the Maryland Plumblossom, but very, very still usable for me. And for me, I think what really just was fun about these is the color. It just adds the most beautiful tone to bouquets. And again, you could just do a group of these in and of themselves to enjoy. And the Madame Butterfly series has a bunch of beautiful colors. What drew me to the cherry bronze was the peach. I am a sucker for peach colors. So there's a lot of other fun ones that I'll probably try though in the future. So this is Madame Butterfly Cherry Bronze. Okay, the last variety I grew was the Potomac mix. Now, I don't have much of a mix to show you right now. So there are a bunch of colors in the mix. I did not get any of the white, yellow, or purple. What I did get was these beautiful red. I had 2 plants of this red, and I don't know if you can see, but the color is very velvety. And I'm especially enjoying these now in the fall. Very thin stems off of the red, and that just might be the couple plants I had didn't do well. The Potomac series is supposed to be known for thicker stems. And the Potomac series is also a group 3 or 4, similar to the Madame Butterfly. So a main season or all season flower. And again, they have pumped out blooms since I planted them, but I can't say that they performed better than the Maryland Plumblossom. So this is the red, and then quite the showstopper, this is orange. And again, oh, the sun is very challenging here. Very sunset colors, and it's this peachy pink with orange, and then inside in the throat is that yellow, and beautiful. And I am getting some thicker stems on the orange. I also had, but I don't have any to show you now, but I'll show you some pictures. I had some pink and some of the darker pinkish purple. Those were beautiful, but I only had one plant of each. So part of me is wondering, because I had several of the red and several of the orange, if those two colors for some reason did better or thrived more. But I was bummed to not have especially that purple, so I am going to be growing Potomac lavender this next year. So I can't wait to see how that one turns out. So now that you've seen them inside, let's go take a look at them outside. All right, so here we are outside in my Snapdragon patch, and it's just in a 4x4 raised garden bed, and I didn't even use the whole bed for these. I actually planted in very early spring some Dara over back in this corner that took up probably 1/4 of the bed. I took that out midsummer, and now I have my cool season hardy annuals that I sowed this fall in here. But a lot of stems from just this small amount of space. Now this is a few days later from when I shot the indoor video, and luckily I have a pink here, a Potomac Pink, to show you. Isn't she beautiful? Just a very bright pink with a tiny bit of orange in the throat there. And here you can see the red. And this is what I mean by, this is what the geotropic nature of these plants does. So here's some that fell over and are now reaching up towards the sun. This one looks like it broke, unfortunately. So pretty. I'll have to cut this and bring it inside. Here's a close-up on the Maryland Plumblossom. You can see this one also has a little bit of a yellow throat. Just a little bit. So pretty swaying in the wind. And then here is a close-up on Potomac Orange. He's got a little rained on, so I feel like the color has maybe faded a little bit. Now on the spacing for these, I'll take you down in. I tried to space them 4 to 6 inches apart. Some of them are a little farther apart because I've pulled out just a couple plants. Some just tipped over, and we're not gonna, even if I staked them, be straight again. But that was about, I found that was good spacing. So you can see these two are about 4 to 5 inches apart. And that worked really well. There's still some holes in the middle again where I pulled out the plants. Look at this Potomac Orange. So pretty. But you can see what I mean about the different bloom sizes. But the color is pretty consistent. The last thing I'll show you is the place in my landscape that I had planted several of the Madame Butterfly Cherry Bronze, and these did not perform well at all. This is my last plant, and I had to pull out the rest because they succumbed to some disease. So that was unfortunate. So I think I'm going to continue to put them in the raised beds this next year. It was a good experiment for me. I'll probably try it again once my soil has improved over in the next few years. Hopefully it improves. But that is the entirety of my Snapdragon patch. Here we are on the other side of my bed, my Snapdragon bed, and here is a sneak peek at the Snapdragons I'm going to grow next year. I did another mix of Potomac, but I also did Potomac Lavender because I didn't get any of that this year, and some Chantilly salmon, so I'm really excited to see those. And back here I have a couple yarrow. Thanks for joining me today, guys. I hope you had as much fun as I did. Excuse me.